Hello biology students, here's your study guide key for Unit 1, Introduction to Biology. Here's your vocab. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because we'll review it later, but if you'd like to pause and read, you sure can. Let's move on then and start talking about the characteristics of life. The first one is cellular organization. All living things have one or more cells. Cells are organized internally with things like organelles, and then they can also be organized into tissues, which form organs, which form organ systems, which can form a creature, like an organism. So my example is that one muscle cell combines with other muscle cells to make muscle tissue. A muscle tissue organ would be a bicep. If you add up all of the muscles, it creates a muscular system. If you add up all of the systems, it makes you. For things that grow and develop, we know that they grow by dividing their cells to increase size, and they develop new traits or abilities over time. Even if they are a one-celled organism, they will do this. But my example would be that my kids are growing taller and learning to count and do other awesome things. All living things reproduce. This is required for the species, but not necessarily for an individual. An example of that would be a sterile hybrid, like when you combine a horse and a donkey. A mule is sterile, still alive, but in the general sense, if you combine two organisms, it's going to make more of the same offspring of the same type. All creatures are going to respond to stimuli, reacting to internal or external changes, and I've got two examples there. Living things all have a metabolism, so they're going to use and generate energy. They all have homeostasis, so they're going to keep their internal conditions stable, even if you change things outside of them. So a great example of that is when we sweat or shiver to keep our body temperature at 98.6 degrees. And then for adaptations or evolving over time, I incorporated this with heredity because you inherit traits, but those traits make you either look identical to your parents or slightly different to your parents. And over a long period of time, many generations, that can change what the species looks like. For example, the first domesticated dogs were very, very wolf-like, but over time, we inherited different characteristics to different types of dogs, and then now we have all these crazy dogs like golden doodles and puggles. Animals maintain homeostasis. Two examples would be like when my dog pants when she's overheated, and that helps her lower her body temperature. And then birds fluff up their feathers to warm up when the weather turns cold. Both of those are temperature, but you could also talk about the fact that my dog ate an entire tub of frosting, and then homeostasis to keep her blood sugar balanced. She vomited it all back up. That was lots of fun. Blue carpet, yes. All right, and then another example of animal homeostasis might be the fact that ocean fish have a special gland to help them get rid of extra salt because they're living in salt water. Plant homeostasis, you could talk about plants in salt water. They can either pump out the extra salt, or they can actually have salt crystals form on the edge of their leaves. And then in hot environments, plants have lots of different ways of doing homeostasis. They can be white to reflect heat. They can spread out to cover the ground and keep their roots cool. They can prevent water loss in heat by closing their stomata, those little pores on their plants. Lots and lots of things. Look through the examples that we had in class. Scientific method is just basically the steps of a lab report. You start with a question, you do some research, you have a hypothesis. Based on that research, you design an experiment, you collect some data, you process that data, you discuss it, and share it with other scientists, and then you go back to a new purpose or a new question, and you repeat the whole cycle over and over again. Hypothesis. The reason that we have a hypothesis, why, is that it's showing the relationship between your two variables. So without showing that relationship, we don't really have a good experiment. And then we also try to explain the relationship. We always use the format if, then, because. As far as the three variable types, we've got independent variable, which is what you choose to manipulate. So think about it this way. I'm independent. I make my own choices. That's that variable. You're choosing that one. Dependent variable, it depends on what choices you made. So it depends on how many Mentos you added. It depends on what temperature we kept our minnows at. This is what you're measuring as a result of the experiment. And then your control or constant is what you decide to keep the same no matter what. So if you're doing the Diet Coke and Mentos experiment, you're always using a 2-liter bottle of Coke. That's what you're maintaining as your control or your constant. Quantitative data is number-based, like height, weight, and size, and qualitative data is description-based, so color, texture, behaviors, etc. Observations and inferences. Observations are what you notice using your senses. These are usually facts that can be measured or verified. And then an inference is an explanation or guess based on those facts that helps you come to a conclusion. I've got samples there. Here's a data table with the title in the correct format, the effect of independent variable, the distance, on dependent variable, time, and then it's measured in meters and seconds. I use that exact same title down here on the graph. Effect of track event distance, it's my independent variable, on time, dependent variable, and then I've labeled both of my axes. Track event distance, including meters, time, including seconds. If you look, one thing that is different between the image that you were given and the data that I presented here is I had to convert all of this to seconds. This means that it's 1 minute 59.9 seconds. This is 4 minutes and 6 seconds. So to figure out that calculation, what I did is I took 1 minute and 60 seconds plus 59, gave me 119. 4 minutes times 60 seconds plus an additional 6 gave me my 246. So if you're wondering about those numbers, that's where that came from. And then I graphed it out. And the reason we use a scatter plot is because it's two variables and both of them are number based. Do not connect them because we're not trying to make any conclusions here about the rate or the speed of those runners. We're just showing the relationship between event distance and time. That's all you need to know for tomorrow's test. Best of luck to you guys. I will see you at class.